She was about to cancel her little boy's birthday cake until a man in line stopped her. She didn't know he was one of the richest men in the city, and that her life was about to change forever. It was supposed to be a happy day, the one day of the year Emma always promised herself would be perfect. Her little boy, Noah, was turning 6. For weeks she had been saving every spare coin, tips from the diner, a few dollars from her tutoring work, just so she could buy him the chocolate cake he loved. It wasn't anything fancy, but to Noah, that cake meant everything. It meant birthday candles, laughter, and a memory that would make him feel just like every other kid in school. The small bakery smelled like heaven. Fresh pastries lined the shelves, golden croissants gleamed behind the glass, and the air was sweet with vanilla and sugar. Outside, sunlight streamed through the big windows, casting warm light on the counter. It should have been a beautiful moment, but as Emma stood there, tired, anxious, and clutching her worn-out purse, she could already feel the happiness slipping away. "Mommy, look." Noah pointed excitedly to the display case, his little face lighting up. "That one's got sprinkles." Emma smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "That's the one we're picking up, sweetheart. Remember? The one we ordered last week." He nodded eagerly, bouncing on his toes. His excitement made her heart ache. He didn't know how hard it had been to save that money. He didn't know that some nights she'd skip dinner so she could afford the cake. The cashier, a kind woman in her 40s, smiled warmly as she brought out the small chocolate cake, carefully boxed with a blue ribbon. "Happy birthday to the little man," she said cheerfully. "He's a lucky boy." Emma's smile faltered as she reached into her purse. She pulled out crumpled bills, 5s, 1s, and a handful of coins. Her fingers shook as she counted, her mind racing. $10, $20, $30, $32, $35, and then just a few coins. Her stomach dropped. She counted again, slowly, desperately, but the total didn't change. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the cashier said gently. "The total is $38. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. I thought I had more." She could feel the people behind her shifting in line. A few sighed impatiently. Someone whispered something under their breath. And just like that, the bright, joyful bakery felt small and suffocating. Beside her, Noah looked up, his big brown eyes full of confusion. "Mommy, can we still get the cake?" She wanted to say yes. She wanted to promise him the world. But the truth burned at her throat. She took a deep breath and forced a smile. That same brave smile she'd worn through every hard day. "Not today, sweetheart," she whispered. "Maybe next time." Noah's shoulders slumped, and he nodded quietly. "Okay." Emma turned back to the cashier, embarrassment flooding her face. I'm sorry. I'll have to cancel the order." The cashier hesitated, clearly wanting to help, but there was little she could do. "It's all right," she said softly, taking the cake back. Emma felt her chest tighten. She reached down, taking Noah's hand. "Come on, love," she murmured. "We'll make pancakes instead, just like you like." But she knew pancakes couldn't replace the birthday cake she'd promised. She blinked rapidly, trying not to cry in front of everyone. The smell of frosting and sugar suddenly made her sick. She turned, ready to leave, just wanting to escape the stairs, when a voice behind her spoke. "Excuse me." It was low, calm, and deep. Emma turned and saw him, a tall man in a navy blue sweater, his posture confident, his expression unreadable. His dark hair was neatly styled, and his eyes, sharp yet kind, watched her closely. He held no shopping bag, no basket. He didn't look like he belonged in the small neighborhood bakery at all. He looked like someone who belonged on magazine covers or at fancy galas. His name was Daniel Hayes, though Emma didn't know that yet. To the world, Daniel was a billionaire CEO, the man behind one of the largest real estate empires in the country. To his employees, he was brilliant and unshakable. To investors, he was a genius. But in that moment, he wasn't a businessman. He was just a man who had stopped for coffee and ended up watching a mother's heart break right in front of him. From where he stood, Daniel had seen everything. The trembling hands, the coins, the way she tried to stay strong for her son. He'd seen the way Noah's little smile faded, how the boy pressed closer to his mother when she whispered, "Maybe next time." And something inside Daniel shifted. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story. But he knew that expression, that quiet, desperate kind of love that gave everything and still came up short. Because once, years ago, he'd seen it on his own mother's face. Before the success, before the money, before life had turned golden and effortless. He remembered being that little boy, watching his mom pretend everything was fine while struggling to pay for groceries. He remembered the embarrassment, the whispered apologies, the way she smiled through pain. Daniel swallowed hard. He'd built his empire to escape that feeling, to make sure he'd never see it again. But here it was, right in front of him, alive in the eyes of a stranger. As Emma turned to leave, clutching her son's hand, Daniel felt something he hadn't in years. He couldn't just walk away. He didn't know why. Maybe it was the way Noah looked up at his mom like she was his entire world, or the quiet dignity Emma carried even as her world crumbled, but he knew one thing for certain. He was going to do something. Something that would change both their lives forever. And as the bakery door chimed softly behind them, Daniel Hayes, the man who could buy anything, realized he was about to make the most meaningful purchase of his life. As Emma whispered to the cashier, her voice cracking as she said she needed to cancel the order, Daniel felt a strange ache in his chest, one he hadn't felt in years. He didn't know her, didn't owe her anything, yet something about the moment refused to let him stand still. He could see the exhaustion in her shoulders, the way she kept her head, slightly lowered as if trying to hide from the world. He could see the quiet pain in her eyes, not the kind that comes from one bad day, but from many, from all the moments she'd had to say, "Maybe next time." And when her little boy's hand slipped into hers, small fingers, clinging tightly, like she was the only thing keeping his world together, Daniel knew. This wasn't about a cake. It was about dignity, about a mother's love. As she turned to leave, Daniel stepped forward before his mind could stop him. "Excuse me," he said softly. Emma froze. She turned around slowly, clearly startled, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Yes," she asked, her voice polite but guarded. She was used to being judged, by strangers, by looks, by silence. Daniel offered a small, warm smile. "Hi. I couldn't help but overhear." Her hand tightened protectively around Noah's. "Oh, yes. I'm sorry if we were holding up the line. We were just—" He raised a hand gently. No, not at all." His tone was kind, not pitying, just human. "You were ordering that cake for your son's birthday, right?" Emma nodded slowly, her cheeks coloring. "Yes, but it's okay. We'll just celebrate at home. I'll make pancakes instead." Daniel smiled, not the polished, businesslike grin he wore in boardrooms, but something genuine. "Pancakes sound great," he said softly. "But every kid deserves a birthday cake." Her brows furrowed slightly, unsure what he meant. He glanced at the cashier. "Please, let me take care of it." Her eyes widened instantly. "Oh, no, I couldn't let you do that." She shook her head, her voice trembling. "You don't even know us." "Maybe not," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But I know what it feels like to want to give your kid everything, and not have enough. Please, let me." There was something in his tone that disarmed her. It wasn't charity. It wasn't pity. It was kindness, rare, quiet kindness. Noah looked up at him, his eyes wide and hopeful. "Really, mister? You'd do that?" Daniel's expression softened into a grin. "Really? Every superhero deserves a birthday cake, right?" Noah's face broke into a smile that could have melted anyone's heart. "I'm 6 today," he announced proudly. Daniel chuckled. 6? That's a big deal. You can't turn 6 without cake. I'm pretty sure it's against the rules." The cashier smiled too, her eyes glistening. "You heard the man," she said, gently placing the cake back on the counter. "Looks like this birthday's back on." Emma hesitated, torn between gratitude and pride. I don't know what to say," she murmured. "Thank you, really, but you don't have to." "I want to," Daniel interrupted kindly. "Please, let me make this little guy's day special." And before she could protest again, he handed his card to the cashier. "Add a few cupcakes, too," he said casually. "And candles. The good ones that sparkle. Noah gasped. The ones that sparkle. Mommy, did you hear that? Emma covered her mouth, blinking rapidly to hold back tears. You really don't have to do all that. Daniel looked at her and said quietly, Don't worry. Consider it a birthday gift from one stranger to another. The cashier rang it up, smiling the whole time, and handed Daniel the bag with the cake and treats. He turned to Emma and handed it to her gently. Here, he said, his tone soft. Happy birthday to your little man. Emma stared at the box, then at him. I can't ever repay you. You don't have to, he said simply. Just promise me you'll both have a great day. Noah tugged on Daniel's sleeve. Will you come to my birthday too? Daniel laughed, taken aback. Oh, I think your mom might want a family-only party. But Emma smiled for the first time. A real smile, tired but beautiful. He's not used to people being this kind, she said softly. Daniel looked at her for a moment, and something flickered behind his eyes. Something even he couldn't name. Maybe kindness is what we all forget to give, he said quietly. The bakery had gone still. Even the other customers were watching silently, smiles spreading across their faces. Emma bit her lip, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you, truly. You didn't just buy a cake today. He tilted his head. Then what did I buy? Her eyes glistened. You gave my son his birthday back. Daniel felt a lump form in his throat, something he hadn't felt in a long time. For a man used to deals worth millions, it was strange how this small gesture felt like the most meaningful thing he'd ever done. As Emma and Noah turned to leave, Noah looked over his shoulder and waved. Bye, mister. Thank you. Daniel waved back, smiling. Happy birthday, champ. When they walked out the door, the sunlight hit Emma's face, and for the first time in months, she felt light, hopeful. And Daniel, still standing there, coffee untouched, realized something had shifted in him too. He'd gone into that bakery for caffeine, but he was leaving with something far deeper. He didn't know why this woman and her son had stirred something inside him, but he couldn't shake it. Maybe it was the way she looked at her boy, with so much love despite everything. Maybe it was the quiet dignity she carried even in struggle. Whatever it was, he knew he wasn't done thinking about them. Because sometimes the smallest encounters, the ones that last only minutes, are the ones that change everything. And Daniel Hayes had no idea that this chance meeting would soon turn into something much more, something that would test his heart, his past, and everything he thought he knew about love. That night, Daniel barely slept. He had signed contracts worth billions, made decisions that shaped skylines, but none of it compared to the image that replayed in his mind over and over again. A young mother counting coins for her son's cake, trying to smile through heartbreak. He turned on his lamp, staring at the ceiling. Why couldn't he stop thinking about them? He'd seen poverty before. He donated to charities, built schools, sponsored families through foundations his assistants managed. But this was different. Emma and Noah weren't just names on a donation list. They were real, standing right there in front of him. It wasn't about guilt. It wasn't even about kindness. It was about connection, something Daniel hadn't felt in a very long time. The next morning, before heading to his office, he found himself driving back to the same small bakery. He wasn't sure why. Maybe to thank the cashier. Maybe to ask if Emma had come back. Maybe, deep down, he just wanted to make sure they were okay. The familiar smell of warm bread and vanilla filled the air as he stepped inside. The same cashier from the day before looked up, surprised, and then smiled knowingly. "Morning, Mr. Hayes," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Back for more cake." Daniel chuckled softly. "Not exactly." The cashier raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Looking for the lady from yesterday?" He hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Yeah, I just wanted to make sure she and her boy had a good birthday." The cashier's expression softened. "They did. She told me thank you again before she left." Then, after a pause, she reached under the counter and pulled out a folded receipt. "Funny thing, she left this behind. It had her name and address written on the back." Daniel blinked, surprised. "You sure?" The cashier smiled knowingly. "Call it fate, sir. Or maybe just good timing." He looked down at the receipt. The name Emma Carter, neatly written in blue ink, followed by a small address. His heart tugged. He thanked the cashier and left, the piece of paper folded carefully in his hand. An hour later, Daniel stood outside a small apartment building on the edge of town. The structure was old, the paint peeling from the wooden frames, the steps creaking under his shoes. But there was something warm about it. Through one of the windows, he could hear laughter, a child's laughter, bright and pure, cutting through the quiet of the afternoon. For some reason, it made him smile. He hesitated for a moment, unsure if he should really be there. But then, he took a deep breath and knocked. There was a pause, and then the sound of footsteps. The door opened slowly. When Emma appeared, her eyes widened in shock. "Mr. Hayes," she breathed. He offered a sheepish smile. "Hi. I'm sorry for showing up like this. I know it's unexpected." Her brows furrowed slightly. "Is everything okay?" "Yes," he said quickly. I wanted to make sure your son had a good birthday yesterday." For a second, she looked at him like she couldn't believe anyone would go out of their way like that. Then her expression softened. "He did," she said quietly. "More than you know." Just then, Noah came running from inside, holding a small plate with a piece of cake. "Mommy, it's the nice man from the bakery." Daniel laughed, crouching down to his level. "Hey, birthday boy, you saved me a piece." Noah grinned proudly. "Yup, it's the last one." Daniel smiled. "Well, that's an honor." The boy handed it to him with both hands. "I made a wish too." Daniel tilted his head, curious. "Oh yeah, what did you wish for?" Noah looked up, his little voice sincere. "I wished for a dad who's kind like you." Daniel froze. It was a simple sentence, innocent, pure, but it hit him like a punch straight to the heart. He looked at Emma, who quickly blinked back tears and knelt down beside her son. "Sweetheart," she said gently, brushing his hair back. "You don't need to say that." Daniel stopped her softly. "It's okay," he said, his voice low, a little unsteady. "That's a pretty amazing wish." Noah smiled brightly, completely unaware of how deeply his words had affected the grown man in front of him. Emma cleared her throat and stood, trying to change the subject. "Would you like to come in for some coffee? It's not much, but—" "I'd like that," Daniel said immediately. Inside, the apartment was small but cozy. Hand-drawn pictures taped to the fridge, a worn couch covered in a patchwork blanket, and a vase of wildflowers sitting by the window. It wasn't wealth that filled the room, it was love. Noah sat on the rug, playing with a few toy cars, humming to himself. Emma poured coffee into 2 mismatched mugs and handed one to Daniel. "I still don't understand why you are being so kind," she said with a soft laugh. "Most people would have forgotten about us by now." Daniel smiled faintly, staring into the steam rising from his cup. "Maybe I've spent too long surrounded by people who only smile when they want something. It's nice to meet someone who doesn't." She looked at him, surprised. He continued, "You reminded me what real strength looks like, Emma. You were willing to walk away from that cake, to protect your son's feelings. That's love, and it's rare." Her eyes glistened. "I don't feel strong most days," she admitted quietly. "I just do what I can." Daniel looked at her gently. "That's what strength really is." For a few moments, they sat in silence, not awkward, but comfortable, peaceful. The sound of Noah's laughter filled the space again, echoing softly through the small apartment. And for Daniel, something shifted. He had spent years chasing numbers, deadlines, and power, all the things that made him successful. But right here, in this tiny living room with chipped paint and second-hand furniture, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, peace. As he left that day, Noah ran to the door and waved. "Bye, mister. Come back soon." Daniel smiled. "I just might." Emma stood behind her son, her hand resting protectively on his shoulder. "Thank you again," she said sincerely. "For everything." He nodded, his eyes soft. "No need to thank me. I should be thanking you." "For what?" she asked. "For reminding me what really matters." When Daniel walked away that afternoon, he didn't realize it yet, but his life had just changed. Because sometimes a child's innocent wish isn't just a dream. Sometimes, it's the beginning of something you never knew your heart needed. The days that followed were quieter for Daniel, but they didn't feel empty anymore. He used to wake up to the sound of emails, his phone buzzing with endless meetings and deadlines. But lately, his mornings started with a thought that made him smile. Emma and Noah. It wasn't planned. It wasn't even logical. But somehow, he kept finding reasons to see them. At first, it was small things, dropping by the bakery to pick up coffee, then coincidentally showing up near the diner where Emma worked. He'd wave through the window, sometimes leaving a cup of her favorite latte on the counter before disappearing again. She tried to tease him about it. You know, most billionaires spend their evenings at fancy galas, not diners with sticky tables and broken booths, she said once with a playful smile. He chuckled. Maybe I got tired of fancy places. The coffee's better here anyway. She rolled her eyes. Sure it is. But she couldn't hide her smile, and he noticed. Noah grew fond of him quickly, too. The boy would light up every time Daniel visited, running to show him drawings or stories from school. Once, he proudly presented a crayon sketch of 3 stick figures, a woman, a man, and a little boy holding hands. That's us, Noah said excitedly. You, me, and Mommy. Daniel felt something warm and unfamiliar spread through his chest. He looked at Emma, who was watching quietly, her eyes glistening. She laughed softly. He's been drawing families lately. Daniel smiled. He's got good taste. As the weeks turned into months, a rhythm formed between them, unspoken, natural. Daniel would stop by the diner when he could, sometimes just for a quick chat during her break. Other times, he'd surprise Noah with small gifts, a new book, a soccer ball, or his favorite candy. But what touched Emma most wasn't the gifts. It was how genuine he was with her son. Daniel didn't treat Noah like a charity case. He treated him like a kid who mattered. And Emma noticed something else too. The man everyone saw on magazine covers, the billionaire CEO known for his ruthless efficiency, was nowhere to be found when he was with them. With her, he was different. Softer, kinder, real. One afternoon, after Noah's school play, they walked home together. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the park. Noah ran ahead, pretending to chase butterflies, his laughter echoing across the path. Emma turned to Daniel and smiled. He hasn't laughed like that in a long time. Daniel looked at the boy, then at her. Maybe he just needed someone to remind him he's allowed to. She glanced at him. You really care about him, don't you? I do, Daniel said quietly. He's an incredible kid. You've done an amazing job, Emma. She laughed softly. Some days I don't feel amazing. Some days I feel like I'm barely holding it together. He stopped walking and faced her. Then you're doing it right. Because the people who keep going even when it's hard, they're the strongest ones. Emma looked away, blinking fast. No one had said anything like that to her in years. Later that evening, they sat on a park bench, watching Noah play on the swings. The air was cool, and the city lights twinkled in the distance. Emma sighed softly. You know, I used to teach literature. That was before everything changed. Daniel turned to her. You were a teacher? She nodded. For almost 7 years. I loved it. But when the school lost funding, I was one of the first to go. After that, it was just survival mode, diner shifts, tutoring, anything to make ends meet. Daniel's chest tightened. You shouldn't have had to go through all that. She shrugged gently. Life doesn't ask for permission, Mr. Hayes. Daniel, he corrected, smiling. Just Daniel. She smiled too, softly. Daniel. For a few moments, they sat in silence, just the sound of children laughing and swings creaking in rhythm with the wind. Then he said something he hadn't planned to. You know, I've built skyscrapers, companies, and a name people recognize. But none of that ever felt as meaningful as buying that cake for you and Noah. She turned toward him, surprised, then laughed quietly. Maybe because that's the first thing you did with your heart, not your wallet. He chuckled. You might be right. Their laughter faded into comfortable quiet. The truth was, Daniel didn't understand what was happening to him. He'd spent years building walls of money, success, control. But Emma and Noah were tearing them down without even trying. And maybe, Just maybe. He didn't want to rebuild them. He glanced at her, the fading sunlight catching the soft curve of her smile. You and Noah deserve the world, Emma. She shook her head gently. We don't need the world, Daniel. We just need peace. Then maybe, he said softly. You deserve both. Emma didn't reply right away, but her heart raced in a way she hadn't felt since before life had broken her spirit. There was something in his voice, sincerity, vulnerability, that made her believe him. As they walked home that night, Noah skipping ahead and singing to himself, Daniel found his hand brushing against hers. Neither of them pulled away. It was small, a moment so delicate it could have been missed, but to both of them, it meant everything, because in that single touch, there was understanding, forgiveness, and something new blooming quietly, something neither of them had expected. Hope. That night, after putting Noah to bed, Emma stood by her window, staring out at the city lights. She thought of Daniel, his kindness, his laughter, the way he looked at her like she was more than just someone struggling to survive. She smiled to herself. Maybe for once, the universe was giving her something good. And miles away, in his penthouse overlooking the same city, Daniel sat by the window too, thinking about a woman who had reminded him what life was really about. He didn't know where this road would lead, but for the first time in years, he wasn't afraid of where it might go. Because love doesn't always begin with fireworks. Sometimes it begins with a slice of cake and a wish from a child. A few months later, the little bakery that once held a mother's heartbreak had become the heartbeat of something new. The sign above the door read, Noah's Corner, fresh cakes, fresh starts. The letters were painted in soft gold, and below them, a little drawing of a cupcake with a smile, Noah's own design. The morning sun spilled across the windows, filling the shop with warmth. Inside, the smell of chocolate, sugar, and vanilla swirled through the air. Laughter echoed as children pressed their faces against the glass display, pointing at the colorful pastries, while Emma worked behind the counter, apron dusted with flour, eyes shining brighter than ever before. It was the grand opening, and the bakery was packed. Friends, neighbors, and even a few curious reporters filled the space, congratulating her, tasting cakes, and sharing stories. Balloons hung from the ceiling, and a big banner read, Because every story deserves a sweet ending. But for Emma, the sweetest part of the day wasn't the success. It was seeing Noah running around, handing cupcakes to customers and saying, My mom made these, with pride. Behind the counter, Daniel watched quietly. He wore a simple shirt and jeans that day, no suit, no expensive watch, no sign of the billionaire the world knew. He didn't want to be the CEO or the man in charge. He just wanted to be there. As Emma walked past him carrying a tray of pastries, he smiled. You've outdone yourself. She laughed softly. You say that every time. Because it's true every time, he replied. Emma looked around, the happy faces, the warmth, the joy, and whispered, I still can't believe this is real. Daniel leaned closer, his voice gentle. You earned every bit of it. All I did was help open a door. You built what's inside. The reporters eventually noticed Daniel and gathered near him, microphones ready. One of them asked, Mr. Hayes, you're one of the most successful businessmen in the city. What made you buy this little bakery and give it away? Daniel smiled, looking over at Emma, who was laughing as Noah smeared frosting on her cheek. Because sometimes, he said softly, the smallest kindness can build the biggest miracles. The cameras flashed. His words would appear in newspapers and blogs across the country. But for Daniel, that moment wasn't about headlines. It was about seeing the life he'd helped rebuild. Emma didn't need to be rescued. She just needed a chance. And watching her now, surrounded by love and laughter, he knew she had taken that chance and turned it into something extraordinary. Later that evening, after the crowd had gone and the closed sign hung in the window, the bakery grew quiet. Only the soft hum of the fridge and the faint smell of sugar lingered. Emma sat at one of the tables, exhausted but glowing with pride. Daniel sat across from her, sipping coffee from a mug that said World's Best Mom, Noah's idea of a joke. You really did it, Daniel said softly. We did it, she corrected. They shared a smile. For a while, They just sat there in the peaceful silence, the kind that comes when hearts finally rest after years of struggle. Then, little footsteps pattered across the floor. Noah appeared, clutching a cupcake in his tiny hands, the frosting slightly smudged. "This one's for you, mister," he said proudly, holding it up. Daniel chuckled and crouched down to his level. "For me? Wow, this looks amazing." "It's the last one," Noah said seriously. "That means it's special." Daniel looked at him warmly. "Thank you, buddy. You know what makes it even more special." Noah tilted his head. "What?" Daniel smiled softly. "You. And your mom." Noah giggled, then leaned closer and whispered, "Can I tell you a secret?" "Of course," Daniel said. Noah grinned shyly. "I told Mommy I wished for a dad who's kind like you. And guess what? My wish came true." Emma froze, her hand flying to her mouth as tears filled her eyes. Daniel's throat tightened. He blinked rapidly, trying to hold back his emotions. Then he gently placed a hand on Noah's shoulder and said, his voice breaking just slightly, "You can call me Dad now, if you want." For a moment, time stood still. Noah's eyes widened, then sparkled with pure joy. "Really? You mean it?" Daniel nodded, smiling through the lump in his throat. "Yeah, I do." Noah threw his arms around him, hugging him tightly. Daniel closed his eyes, holding the boy close, his heart finally full. Emma watched them, tears streaming down her face. But they weren't the tears of a woman who'd lost everything. They were the tears of someone who had finally found what she'd been missing. That night, after they locked up the bakery, the three of them walked outside. The street was quiet, the sky glowing with stars. Daniel reached for Emma's hand, and this time, she didn't hesitate. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" he asked. "For seeing me when no one else did." He smiled. "You were never invisible, Emma. You were just waiting for someone to look closely enough." They stood there, hand in hand, as Noah danced around them with a sparkler he'd found in his pocket, laughing and shouting, "Look, Mom! Look, Dad!" Emma looked up at Daniel, smiling through her tears. He's been waiting to say that. Daniel brushed a strand of hair from her face. "So have I." The sparkler flickered in the night air, painting golden trails around them as laughter echoed through the quiet street. And for the first time in years, Emma felt something she hadn't dared to believe in home. Weeks later, the bakery became a local sensation. People from all over came not just for the cakes, but for the story behind them. A story about kindness, second chances, and the power of love. Daniel still had his empire, his meetings, his responsibilities. But his favorite part of the day wasn't closing deals. It was walking into Noah's corner, hearing Emma's laughter, and being tackled by a giggling 6-year-old, calling him Dad. He had spent years chasing success, thinking happiness came with numbers and headlines. But now he knew the truth. Life's real wealth was found in the moments money could never buy. Because the billionaire who once lived for success had finally found something priceless, a family. And that, more than all the gold in the world, was his sweetest reward. Sometimes, a simple act of kindness can change a life forever. Because when you lead with your heart, miracles follow. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that prove love still exists.